While I wait for my caps to arrive, which should be here tomorrow, let's take a look at the cabinet. I flipped it upside down because I want to put some pads on it so I don't scratch my hardwood floors, and it has the usual metal caps, so I'll pop those out. Also noticed there was a bit of a gap on this front trim, and when I got my other 3812, this front piece had broken off completely, so I guess it was a common problem. Maybe I can get some glue in there and clamp it. Or, let's see, maybe it's kind of loose already. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's coming off out completely. Alright, that's a good thing, because then I can get in here and clean out all the grooves really well and then clamp it back together very tightly. Also couldn't help but notice that they didn't even bother to finish the underside of this. I guess they figured nobody would see it, so they didn't even get anything under here. It seems like it's just bare plywood. So what I'm planning on doing with this cabinet is I'm going to keep it as is until I get my other 3812 completely refinished, because I want to use this as the color standard of what it should look like. And then I will eventually refinish this, at least partially. I mean, around the base there's practically no finish left at all. I don't want to leave it like that. The wood should get at least some protection. Around the face, it's in pretty good shape. This side, other than some scratches, is okay. The other side's pretty bad though. And this is a whole section here where the finish is completely gone. And finish loss here. And I think trying to blend in stuff like this would be tough. The base would be no big deal, because if that's a slightly different color, so what? It's a completely separate piece of wood. If it's a little bit different color, you know, who's to say that wasn't how it was supposed to be? But something like this, you'd really want to do around all four, or all three sides rather, to make them all match. So I don't know. But as I say, for now, I'm going to glue it, clamp it, get some felt pads on the bottom, and then as soon as I find the time, I want to get my other cabinet up in the attic and strip it and prep it for some new toner lacquer. And I want to do some test samples too. I'm thinking medium brown walnut is the way to go. Perfect brown has a little more red in it. I don't think that would be right. Dark walnut I think wouldn't be quite right. So, you know, I end up using medium brown walnut on a lot of stuff, but like most of my Philco radios, that seems to just be what the common color was back then. Turns out that all four corners were pretty loose, so after I knocked off the metal caps, I actually broke apart this joint, extricated the wood screws, which were darn rusty, and then cleaned up the old glue, put on new glue, put in a new wood screw, clamped it all down good. This one is rock solid now. So moving on to the next one. So not a good idea to just squirt new glue in there and try gluing it back together, because there's old glue on here, and I don't know how well modern glue will stick to the old glue, but for sure new glue will stick great to clean wood. So it goes back together like that, and then moving on to the front, I can see now why this came loose, because the glue blocks are completely gone. You can see it very clearly, the marks of where it used to be. So there was a big old block of wood in each corner here, because without that there's not a whole lot of glue surface, just a little bit in here, so that just broke right off. So I'm going to run out to my local home improvement center and see if I can get some stock that's maybe 1.5 inch or 1 inch square, and I'll cut down some pieces and make some new glue blocks. Alright, just got back from the hardware store. Got some modern wood screws that are the closest equivalent I could find to the old ones, and once again I'm kind of irritated at the quality of modern hardware. it seems like whenever I'm trying to find machine screws or wood screws, the modern versions have a coarser thread pitch. Don't know why that is. Not so irritating for wood screws, I suppose. It'll grip in there all right. But when it comes to machine screws, like for Philco chassis from the 30s, you just can't get pitches. I think like most common be like a number 10 with a 32 pitch, but all I can find are 24. Very irritating. But anyways, I suppose this will do. Now, as for the glue blocks, I've never come across any like pre-cut 45-degree angle glue blocks. So in the past, I bought some square stock and just cut it down, made my own. But all I could find nice poplar was either much smaller stuff, like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and then it jumped up to this, which is I think was 1 3/4. They were out of the 1 inch, the 1 1/4 inch. But I figured I'd go with this anyways, because I don't know if any of you recall, but some time ago I got another Admiral set. I think it was a 30A15. It was really messed up. Much worse water damage than this or any of my other sets, and the feet were especially bad in the back. So I figure I can take this and cut off a length, say 2-3 inches long, and use it for some new feet on that cabinet. And as for this one, I'll just rip it down a bit, cut off a 45-degree angle, and make myself a couple glue blocks out of this big hunk of wood. Alright, that ought to hold it. After cleaning out the old glue, got a nice thick bead down in there, and got my new glue blocks in place and clamped the heck out of it. So as soon as that sits up, get these clamps off, put on some felt pads, and I can flip this thing back over. My new mica caps arrived, and I just finished installing the 30 picofarad cap after I carefully nipped away at the old mica cap and removed it. So I'll reinstall this and see if it makes any difference. Now for the second IF can, they do show 35, but when I opened up this can, it turned out that was a tubular ceramic type. So I just left it alone. After replacing the mica cap, I reinstalled the IF can, and now I'm going through the alignment procedure yet again. This time I have a tool that I can get down inside of that one oddball IF can to make an adjustment. I took one of my existing tools, which I think is made out of fiberglass, and I just sanded it down so the diameter was small enough to slip through the top core. You can see it more clearly in this diagram here. So this is the early design, where the upper slug is for 21.8 peaked for a maximum, and the 21.25 lower slug is tweaked for a minimum. That's the audio trap, and that's the one I was trying to adjust, and not succeeding before. And you can see they quickly changed the design to have 2 separate coils to make technician's life much easier, I imagine. Alright, so I went through and did that, and then I peaked the audio IF cans for 21.25 megahertz. Now the last thing I'm doing is the ratio detector, where you should get a nice S-curve, or so you might think. When I put my sweep generator on it, it looked kind of lumpy at one end. Then I consulted the service info, and that is typical of the early design, is that at the high end you do get kind of a lumpy double response at the high end. So what I've got set up right now is I'm doing with the VTVM, and at exactly 21.25 it should be dead center. Oh, I should say too that I took my VTVM and with no input I adjusted the zero control so that the needle is dead center, and now with 21.25 megahertz going in, it should still be dead center when you've got it hooked up to the output of the ratio detector. Now it should be a minimum at 21.05 and a peak at 21.45. Simple way to do that with this guy is I can just dial in those frequencies. So 21.05, needle should go down. 21.05, 2105, it does indeed. And 2145, it should go up about the same amount as it went down at the other, with the other frequencies. So I think we're looking pretty good. So now let's try this out with an actual signal source. I'm just doing a quick and dirty test right now. Just attach some alligator clips to the antenna lugs and tune it into channel 6. Check it out. Barely turn the volume up. Plenty of volume.
You say that's exactly how this grace thing works. It's not that.
No, I know that this is really a quasi-FM radio station. They drive the audio carrier harder than a real TV station would. But this is a very encouraging sign. There's one more issue I want to take a look at in this set. That has to do with these 3 boxes. There are 2 coils in each. One at the top, one at the bottom. The coils at the bottom, according to the alignment instructions, you adjust for a peak at various frequencies. The 3 coils at the top, you adjust for a minimum. Show that right here in this little diagram. So there's the max on the bottom, 22.3 megahertz, 25.25, and 23.5. That's the staggered IF I was talking about earlier. Those all work fine. I've peaked them all, no problem. The 3 on the top you adjust for a minimum. When I adjust those, nothing happens. Those are traps. You can see them here on the response curve. The outer 2, the 27.25 and 18.75, are to create sharp drop-offs so that when you tune to the adjacent channel you don't get bleed over. And I am getting bleed over. If I feed in, say, channel 3, if I go to channels 2 or 4, I see some of channel 3 coming through. So I don't think these traps are working right at all. And the third trap at 21.25, that's to block any sound from bleeding in to the video. Now, if we look at the schematic for those coils, let's just take this one for example. The thing on the top there, it says 19.75, that's the trap. All it is a coil and a capacitor in parallel, not going to anything. When you adjust this right, they're supposed to resonate at 19.75 and effectively kill any 19.75 megahertz signal from getting through this can. And similar on the other 2 coils. Now the one on the bottom that's working fine has no capacitor in parallel with it. So what do you suppose that 105 picofarad capacitor is made out of? I bet it's exposed mica, just like in that audio IF. So before I go ahead and pull all 3 cans out, I'm just going to do one of them and explore it and test the mica cap like I did for the audio. And if it's bad, I'll replace it with a modern mica cap, pop it back in, and if the trap then works, I'll do the same surgery on the other 2. And just to show you what I'm talking about, dialed in 27.25. Feeding that in by lifting up the shield on the mixer oscillator tube, and I've got my VTVM attached to the output of the video detector, and I've adjusted my output levels so I get about, let's say, 1 volt here on the bottom scale. Now I'm supposed to adjust this center coil here on top for a minimum, meaning when I adjust this, that needle should move up and down, and I want to adjust it so the needle is at the lowest possible level. Well, I'm cranking it, I'm cranking it, I'm cranking it, and it's moving, but not as much as I would expect. Because right now, it's bottomed out. And when I first got the set, they were all kind of at about the same position, about halfway out. And if I keep going back the other way, it slowly increases. So it is having some effect. But when you've got a coil and a capacitor in parallel like that, and it's a trap, it should have a very well-defined dip in it. And this does not. And you can see just in the discoloration, this was originally around about here. And if I twiddle it to either side of that point, the needle barely moves. I want to see this needle go like, wow, like way down. And it's just not doing that. So I think I've got a leaky mica cap in there. Or I suppose the coil could be bad too, but I don't want to think about that option. I'm hoping it's a bad cap that I can easily replace. It turns out it wasn't quite as bad as I thought, because although there are 6 lugs, only 4 of them are actually used. So let's take the first look inside this can, probably since it was made. Alright, so there is the power resistor I will replace, and there is that exposed mica cap that looks pretty cruddy now that I can see it up close. 95 picofarad. Couldn't find any 95s, but I got some hundreds, and I'm thinking between that and the ability to adjust the slug should be good enough. So interesting construction here. So the inner winding, that's the one that lets the signal pass through. That's the bottom slug you adjust. And then the top slug works with this trap, which is not connected to anything. There are just those windings there, the capacitor across the leads, and that's it. There are no connections to the base. So somehow, between this slug, that 6 turns of wire there, and that capacitor, it blocks filters. Sorry, it blocks frequencies at you know, whatever. What did I say this one was? 27.75, I think, for this one. Oh, whatever. I managed to remove the capacitor without destroying it. I've got it hooked up to my capacitance bridge. So first let's see if we can measure any capacitance. And nope, no eye deflection around the whole dial. How about leakage? Yep, leaky on the lowest range. That is just terrible. Just like the mica cap in the audio IF can. So I think it's a pretty good indicator that they're going to be bad in the other 2 cans as well. So from now on, when I restore these Admiral sets, I just got to go right in there and replace them. Just it's not worth messing around with. Just go ahead and replace them. And the same applies to the 30B1 chassis. And I think there's a 30C1 and 30D1, and then the second generation 20A1, which is a split chassis, like in my 24A12 Bakelite. I do recall I replaced them in just the audio IF cans, and I know for sure those were exposed mica as well. So if you're working on any late 40s Admiral sets and you got issues with the audio or video, definitely worth taking a look inside these cans. There's the new 100 picofarad mica capacitor and 6.8K resistor. I'll remount this, fire up the test equipment again, and see if I can peak this coil. Okay, I've got the IF can reinstalled. Fired up the RF generator, 27.25 megahertz. Got the TVM hooked up. Let's see if I can now adjust this coil to get a big drop off. Up a little bit. Keep backing off. There we go. That's what I want to see. And then it starts going back up. Okay. So, right about there. Much better. Definitely a distinct, what's that, like a peak, I guess you call it a trough, but well, I'm adjusting the trap so it will reject 27.25, so we get a big drop off. Now I'll do the same thing to the other two cans.